if you understand what the teachings speak of, whether it be Taoism or Buddhism or mystical Christianity, even neuroscience, if you understand what these teachings speak of, then it's natural that you are interested in experiencing what these teachings are talking about. It's natural that you are interested in experiencing that. So then the question is, how do you do that? How do you experience yourself? How do you experience the reality that is the truth? And how do you know when you are experiencing the reality that is the truth? Well, one way, in terms of the teachings that are speaking about the direct way, the direct process of experiencing the truth, what those teachings say is that an approach, a way to approach this question of how do I experience my true nature, and how do I know if I am experiencing my true nature, the teachers suggest to us that one way to enter into this experience is to understand that you are experiencing it. You are experiencing it. If you understand that, it sets up an easier path. If you are experiencing it, then it eliminates all of the attempts that you might get involved with to attempt to experience it. Or at least it shortens that process, right? Because you and I don't have to do what the Buddha did. We don't have to take years and years and years and practice all kinds of different difficult practices to attempt to realize this possibility. In fact, one of the things that Buddhism teachings and the Buddha taught was to assist people in realizing this possibility without going through everything he went through to experience this possibility. And even though that's beneficial, it doesn't eliminate the fact that there will be a process, even though you hear that you're already experiencing this, right? The personality will deny that you're already experiencing this, because the personality will say, I don't think I am. It doesn't feel like I'm experiencing this. And therefore, if I don't think I am and it doesn't feel like I'm experiencing this, then how can I know that I am experiencing this? So there's a process that has to be gone through that's unavoidable. And that is to deal with the process of being in the orientation of considering yourself to be a physical body and considering yourself to be a personality. Dealing with the process of being in that orientation, and then gradually coming to realize that the fact that you're thinking that you're not there, the fact that you're thinking that you're not the awareness, the fact that you don't feel like you're the awareness is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. So if you don't let that stop you, if you don't use thinking to try and know what you are, if you don't use how you feel to try and know what you are, then the possibility starts to become more available. So that regardless of the thoughts, regardless of the feelings, regardless of the conditioning that's producing the thoughts and the feelings, you're able to look. You're able to look and notice and recognize this very subtle, formless reality that is never not here. This very subtle, formless reality that is never not here. And it's not some big deal. It's not this is part of the confusion that a lot of people experience, is that, they figured that, I listened to Eckhart Tolle's story, I listened to Aji Shanti's story, or I'm aware of Ramana Maharshi's story, of awakening, these stories of awakening, right? In which there are these dramatic experiences, dramatic experiences. And the understanding is that, I'll know if I woke up, I'll know if I made contact with my true nature because I'll have a dramatic experience. My mind will be blown, and then I have my awakening story, right? So I can tell how I woke up, I can tell my awakening story, and that will legitimize me as an awake human being. This is a area that's very problematic because the personality is interested in form. It's interested in what will it be like to be awake? How will I feel when I'm awake? What will I think when I'm awake? And it compares it to getting high. It compares it to getting high. Right? That a lot of people think, when you're awake, you'll be high all the time. You'll be high all the time. Your life will be a constant experience of bliss, constant experience of bliss, constant experience of happiness. No suffering, no anger, no depression, no anxiety, no physical problems, that you'll just be happy no matter what happens. You'll just be happy. This is a major misunderstanding, right? And if it's believed that that's the case, if it's believed that that's the way it'll be if you're awake, the likelihood of experiencing being awake becomes very small, becomes very unlikely. And that's the case for the majority of people who attempt to experience this. I mean, that's the reality. That's one of the reasons that the personality relates to it the way it does, because the reality of it is that very few people actually experience being awake. Now, the reality of it is everybody is awake. So you see, the thing is, everybody is awake, and yet while everybody is awake, everybody's already enlightened. Everybody is awake. Everybody is the awareness already, right? But very few people experience being the awareness. Why? Why? Well, one of the reasons why, one of the big reasons why, is because people have a idea about what it means to be awake. People have these beliefs about what it is to be awake. And only when I experience what I believe it to be will I consider myself to be awake. That's a trap. That's clearly a trap. Why is it a trap? Because you're already awake. You're already awake. So then you may say, okay, you say I'm already awake, okay, but how is that the case when it doesn't occur to me that way? How is that the case when I don't, it's not what it seems to be true and seems to be real for me? So how is that the case? Well, that's the case because the recognition that you're awake may only be a brief recognition. You may only see it briefly and then go back into your ordinary state of mind in which you're identified with thinking in the physical body and whatnot. That doesn't mean that you're not awake. It just means that the hypnosis is still too strong for you to experience the consistent experience of being awake. What do I mean by the hypnosis? I mean your conditioning. Your conditioning is still dominating your experience, and that's why you don't experience being awake. But even when that's the case, you're awake. Even when that's the case, you're awake. And so it starts to open up a possibility of understanding this in a more realistic way. And the more realistic way of understanding this is that You can experience being awake while you're still having the typical thoughts that occur. You can experience being awake while you're still experiencing the typical emotions that occur. So what difference does it make then, if that's the case? The difference that it makes, and this is the key, the difference that it makes is when you know yourself as the awareness of what's happening, you're no longer part of what's happening. Therefore, anger will still arise. You still have conditioning. Anger will still arise, you know. All the emotions will still arise. The thoughts will still play in the mind. All that will still occur, right? The difference is there's a transcendental wisdom that is now present, a transcendental wisdom. What does that mean? It means that as the awareness witnessing the thinking and the feelings, and with the understanding that I have that I am not the thinker of the thoughts, I am not the feeler of the feelings, I am not the physical body, with the understanding, with the transcendental wisdom, I can begin to train my mind to be an image of that transcendental wisdom. That will take time. So I can know myself as the awareness even with the conditioning playing, even with the emotions playing. But I'm not experiencing it the same way as I was. I'm experiencing it with transcendental wisdom, which means that I can experience tranquility and I can experience wisdom, which means the wisdom means that I see things as they are. That's the wisdom. The applied wisdom is I see things as they are. I see that I am not the thinker of my thoughts. I see that I am not a physical body. Now, with that being the case, and the recognition, having had the recognition of my true nature, that's called Kensho in Zen, having had the recognition of my true nature, that doesn't mean I will then begin to experience myself as the pure consciousness. Even though I am the pure consciousness, it doesn't mean that I will experience myself as the pure consciousness. I will experience myself as the pure consciousness that is still operating with the conditioning running. If I understand this, if I have guidance about it, if I depend on the teachings to support me as I go through this process, if I understand that, right, then it doesn't trouble me, it doesn't bother me that I still have this conditioning that's playing that has me experience myself as a separate human being, as a separate, long-lasting personality. And the reality of it is that it's important for me to continue to be aware of that, because as I awaken, as I become more and more aware of myself as awareness and less aware of myself as a physical body and a personality, I need to stay aware of the conditioning and be able to move around in the world as that conditioning. I mean, if you look at the great masters and the great teachers, once they were awake and fully realized, they still behaved the same way as the rest of us. They still acted as if I'm separate from you. They still acted as if that they were a physical body. So they continue to identify with the personality in the physical body because that's the in-the-world reality, right? That's the in-the-world reality. So the experience is not one in which there is this dramatic occurrence that happens. You know, the mistake that people make is they think that these examples that have been given are the model, right? Therefore, I should have some experience similar to that and be able to tell people my wake-up story, right? But that's a misunderstanding. That's a misunderstanding. The reason that these things happen the way they did so dramatically was because for certain individuals, you know, who didn't have, in many cases, who didn't have a preparation for waking up, right? Like Eckhart Tolle didn't have a preparation for waking up. When the waking up occurs, right, the change is so dramatic, the relief is so dramatic, right, that the person experiences this very intense awakening experience that will leave people in kind of a purgatory, will leave people in a no man's land, like in Eckhart Tolle's case. He was sitting around in parks for a while after that, just experiencing the experience of being awake. It was so intense and so different and so new. But that's not the experience of the awareness, that's the experience of the absence of the personality and the tremendous difference and the tremendous relief that is associated with that. Right? But none of that's necessary in terms of the experience of what you are as the awareness. None of it's necessary. In fact, that's not the experience of the awareness. There is no experience of the awareness. Because for there to be an experience of the awareness, you would have to be a subject, and the awareness would have to be the object for you to have an experience of the awareness. So there is no experience of the awareness when you're being the awareness. There's an experience of the difference of the way things occur to you when you're being the awareness, right? But there's no difference in the experience of the awareness because you were already the experience in the awareness before any of that happened. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because I want to try and make it as clear as I can to anybody that hears what I'm saying, that this is what I was saying in one of the last classes, you're not an exception, that you are the awareness, and it's available at all times for you to recognize that that's the case. It's very subtle, but it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's a very ordinary reality. It must be an ordinary reality because you've been experiencing it all along. It's a very ordinary reality. And it's a very simple reality as well, to just notice that there's thinking occurring, there's emotions occurring, there's physical sensations occurring, there's perceptions occurring, there's images occurring, there's a conditioning that's playing, right? But all of that can't exist in a way that you're experiencing it without the awareness. If you're not aware of thinking, if you're not aware of emotions, if you're not aware of the physical body, right, then none of that is in existence. None of that's in existence. It's in existence as a function of the fact that you're aware. It's in existence as a function of the fact that you're aware. So when you go to identify this awareness, don't look for something that's complicated. Don't look for something that's going to be some amazing experience. Don't think it's something that you have to work hard to experience, something that you have to earn the right to experience. It isn't like that. It can't be like that because it's already the case. This is the hardest part to deal with for people who are looking to realize your true nature, right? Is to get out of your way, to get out of the ideas you have about it, to get out of the beliefs you have about it, to let go of the concepts you have about it and understand that it's simpler than all that. It's already happening. It's already happening. And so, once you've made contact with it, once you recognize it, right, then the process that goes on from there is seeing if you can keep noticing it, right, so that as the thought process plays and the emotions plays, right, that those emotions and those thoughts start losing their ability to cause the way you're experiencing your life. They start losing their ability to determine the way you're experiencing your life. Your life is no longer something that's being thought about. Your life is no longer something that's being felt about. Your life is now something that is the awareness of feelings and thoughts. And that life is a different life. That life is a different life. That's a life you can wake up in the morning to, and no matter what the circumstances are that you have, you can experience a state of well-being. No matter what the circumstances that you have, you can experience a state of well-being. And if you practice this consistently, as time passes, the ability of the thought process or the emotions, right, to affect you continues to lessen. and the experience you're having is less and less a function of what you're thinking and what you're feeling, and more a function of the experience of consciousness itself. More and more the function of the experience of consciousness itself, and you come to the point where you realize that consciousness is what's happening. Even the thinking activity and the feelings are consciousness. Consciousness is what's happening. Awareness is what's happening. This is getting to the point where you experience the purity of the experience of being aware, the purity of it. So that just the experience of existence, now is the source of your well-being. Just the experience of existence. The existence as consciousness itself. And that's why you have that saying from the Advaita Vedanta teachings, right? Sat Chit Ananda. The experience of existence, right, is the experience you're having in which it gives you fulfillment. It gives you a sense of well-being. It gives you a sense of peace. It gives you a sense of happiness. It gives you a sense of satisfaction. Just the existence. The existence of what? The existence of consciousness. The existence of consciousness as my identity. So existence as what? The existence of consciousness as my identity, and with the existence of consciousness as my identity, that consciousness is producing happiness and well-being and fulfillment. So that's the natural state, right? Once you make contact with yourself as the awareness, then the process is a process of staying as consistently as possible aware of that, so that all that isn't real, all that isn't true, starts to die out, because you're no longer giving that attention as if it is real and it is true. It starts to die out. And as it starts to die out, this existence, consciousness, happiness reality starts to become a constant, regardless of the circumstances. No, it's what's happening with judgment and thought and emotions. That will continue. That will continue. The difference is that instead of you're feeling bad about how judgmental you are, you understand that's just the mechanism of the mind playing. That's not you. So you don't feel bad about how judgmental you are anymore. You just know you have a judgmental mind that does that 24/7, right? But that's not you. Yeah, it's all coming from consciousness, right? Because consciousness is, in the end, all there is, right? However, what's happening is that your identity is changing. That's the difference. So I'm no longer the person that is afraid of life. I'm no longer the person that I'm using thinking to figure out ways to protect myself. I'm using thinking to figure out ways to get what I want, because I believe getting what I want is what's going to make me happy, right? Now, with transcendental wisdom, I can see that for what it is. I can recognize that that's not going to work. That's not going to get me happy, right? And I can recognize that the conditioning that comes from thinking of myself as a separate being, as a physical body, that conditioning is conditioning that I can see it for what it is now, and I am no longer willing to identify with it. I'm no longer willing to operate from it, because I recognize that it doesn't work. And so I lose interest in it. You lose interest in it because it's irrelevant. It doesn't work. So that's the process. You're looking at what doesn't work from the view of awareness, and from the view of the awareness, you can see that it doesn't work. And from the view of awareness, you have a direct experience and a sense of workability, of what does work. So because that's now available to you, when things come up that are just playing neural patterns from the past, playing conditioning, you see it. You see it. And because you see it, you don't follow it, because you know it's not going to take you where you want to go, because you know it's just going to produce more suffering. This is a very important aspect of the awakening process, right? Because it's one thing to have experienced your true consciousness, your true nature, but it's another thing to be living that, to be living as that in the world. And when you're living as that in the world, your life starts to transform. the problems you've been putting up with and struggling with and trying to change, right? Through all the things you've been doing, trying to get more money, trying to learn more, all the problems that you've been working on, struggling with and trying to change, just like all of humanity, that process comes to an end. And in the process of living your life as what you are, right, you're no longer interacting with what's happening from the unworkable identity. You're now living your life and functioning in relationship to what's happening from an identity that does work. Right? You can see that, and you start to experience the difference it makes, because you start noticing that you have the ability to behave differently. You have the ability not to keep acting out the anger, right? The anger will come up, you'll be aware of the anger, but you won't be angry. This is the transformation. Anger will come up, you'll be aware of the anger, but you won't be angry, because now your identity is the awareness of the anger instead of being the person that's angry. And because that's the case, you can experience the anger, but you're not compelled to identify with it or act it out. And because that's the case, you have access to a different way of being. And because you have access to a different way of being, where you're not being angry anymore, when the anger doesn't do anything but create upset and conflict, your life starts to be more enjoyable. The people around you start experiencing you differently, experiencing how available you are, experiencing how easy you are, because you're not attached to things having to be a certain way anymore. This is a major transformation, right? And it matters in the ways that matter the most, because your relationships start to be fulfilling. Your experience of yourself in your life starts to be fulfilling, right? And that is the result of the practices. It's the result of the process of learning about the truth. And when it starts to pay off, see, that's the thing. You've got to have faith in the truth. You've got to trust the teachings. You've got to allow yourself to be guided by the teachings and by the teachers. And if you do that, right, at some point, this starts to kick in. The truth starts to kick in. You start to experience the difference it makes. Once that happens, then you're well on your way. Because once that happens, then you're clear that this works, and you're clear that it makes the difference that it can make. And once that happens, then meditation, whether you practice a meditation or not, becomes an easy thing to deal with. Because now you know directly for yourself from the difference it makes while you're meditating, right? And I'm not saying that to say that meditation is required for you to wake up. No. I'm simply saying that meditation is a useful tool that can help you get access to the experience of what awareness is, right? And as you get more and more aware of awareness and more aware of the fact that that awareness is your true nature, and you bring that into your life by practicing being aware of it in the circumstances you find yourself in, that's a different life. Then you realize what the masters are talking about. Then you understand what they meant when they said that existence, consciousness, happiness. Because now that existence, consciousness, happiness is something that is available, right? And you're paying attention to its availability because it's there all the time. And as you do that, right, your tendencies to behave in a way that is not workable start to die out naturally. They just die out naturally. All right? Okay, have a good day.